Hi, I'm Alicia Harlove.
I'm Lisa Aegis Gilibert.
I'm Catherine Christensen.
And I'm Becky Bond. And welcome to the Hoof to Horse podcast, where we dive into important discussions on horse care, welfare, and bettering the equine life.
Previously on the Hoof to Horse podcast.
In this episode, we're tackling the topic of laminitis, but specifically, we're going to be giving you our perspective on some potentially controversial laminitis hot takes.
We may need to make a part 2.
I was thinking that too. Okay, so our next hot take for Kat is radiographs are not optional in serious cases of laminitis.
Yes, 100 times yes. If you have a horse with laminitis, you need x-rays. We need x-rays to be able to tell us how much shoulder depth we have, how much room we've got to lower the heels, and anything else, how much bone loss we've had, how comfortable this horse is going to be without protection on their feet long term, or whether they're going to need to be in a shoe package, like all of those things.
Yeah, and I think there's also like quality of life determinations there too. You make a great point about bone loss, because the amount of bone loss really can determine the success that you're going to have in making a horse comfortable again. And some horses with crazy bone loss can become more comfortable than you expect them to become. So it's not always that the radiograph tells you exactly what's going to happen, but you have to have some idea of what's going on inside the hoof. And
I've got
you can't always tell from the outside.
Freeze-dried foot, and the whole pedal bone has been reabsorbed.
Yeah.
It's got no pedal bone. And I'm like, there is no way that horse was ever going to be comfortable.
No.
No matter what anyone did to it.
Yeah.
I think it also helps to, like, at least for me, when I was communicating with clients about expectations, like if you have a horse like that who has such extensive bone remodeling, the expectations for what that hoof capsule is ultimately going to look like are going to be different than a horse who has just had laminitis for the first time and doesn't have any bone remodeling. Like maybe they have some rotation, but the bone hasn't been affected yet. Like I have a much more hopeful prognosis for a horse like that in terms of return to work versus a horse that has significant bone loss.
And why is bone loss a problem for people who don't understand or aren't familiar?
Because, so in cases that I've worked on, if you have a horse that has extensive coffin bone loss, it affects the corium that's around the coffin bone, which affects how the entire hoof grows. Like they're not able to grow as much sole depth. They're not going to have a tight wall connection ever because the actual place that connection grows from is damaged.
What causes the bone loss?
Chronic long-term inflammation.
Yeah. So lack of blood supply.
Yeah.
So if the bone loss it doesn't necessarily cause the lack of being able to grow, it's a symptom of the loss of perfusion in that part of the foot.
Yeah.
So what else is not able to grow and regenerate there? I think people maybe might not understand the connection.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm surprised when I put a glue-on package on or we put boots and pads on and suddenly a horse is able to grow some sole again. It's because you've changed the mechanics and some blood perfusion has changed and it's fine. And comfort. Yeah.
And
that's
another thing that I talk about with my owners is if I've got a heap of bone loss, I'm like, can you afford to have this horse in a shoe package for the rest of its life? We need to put some protection on this horse's foot for it to be comfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because at that point, you're also just getting the pressure off of some of those structures. If you're elevating off the ground a bit, is what I've thought about with like a horse I have at my house is that, if they're barefoot and they have bone loss and they're just like 100% of that, like they're weight bearing on their corium, basically. Like they're just, their corium can't have any relief. And so then once you're putting something on that like lifts them up off the ground a bit, then they're able to have that little room to breathe. And like Lisa was saying, have some better perfusion, hopefully.
Yeah.
And for people that are kind of confused about what we're talking about in terms of internal structures, we'll just pop some images on the video of this conversation. So you can find that link. Is it on YouTube?
It will be on YouTube. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So we can find that link on YouTube to watch, what some of these anatomy images look like in horses with healthy feet or with damaged feet
Yeah.
to kind of visualize what we're thinking of.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Next, Alicia, soaking hay is not a full nutrition plan. And I guess also maybe explain for our listeners why we would soak hay in the first place.
Yeah, that's a great point. So, a lot of times you hear that if a horse is laminitic, ideally a great vet or a great hoof care provider will mention something about soaking hay. And it's because 90% of laminitis cases are typically from a metabolic cause. And that could be either something like equine metabolic syndrome or PPID. And the equine metabolic syndrome cases are so affected by diet where excess sugar and starch can cause an exaggerated insulin response. And we know from studies, Dr. Van Epps has referenced it, and I hope I don't botch it or misrepresent him in any way, is that there was some sort of study where they basically bathed lamina in insulin and it fell apart. So this exaggerated insulin response in the body is literally breaking their lamina apart. So the goal with soaking hay is to soak out as much sugar as you can out of that hay. I don't think it affects the starch very much. I guess Becky would know a bit more about that. I actually haven't tested hay pre and post soaking, but I know there's examples on the ECIR forum online, which is a great free database for owners who are struggling with diet. The soaking hay is not bad in and of itself because it's a stopgap to try to get rid of as much sugar and starch in that horse's diet to ideally get their insulin to calm down a bit and ideally get that laminitis to calm down a bit. But when soaking the hay, you're not just soaking out the sugars. There's other nutrients that you're actually lowering as well. The minor minerals, the major minerals, just the other nutrients that are in that hay are also getting diluted and you're kind of dumping it out with that sugar water. And ultimately, if that's their long-term plan, then you're not giving them the nutrition that the horse needs to be healthy. You're just removing maybe a source of inflammation, but you're not giving them what they need to actually have a proper nutrition plan. So that's a stopgap, but the goal from there is to then test your hay to know exactly what's in it. Do you even need to soak it? Is the hay even high in sugar or starch? Is it high in protein? Some metabolic horses can't have protein above 10% without being laminitic. So you want to know exactly what's in it so then you can tailor what nutrients they do need and what you need to do. If you might need to find a whole different hay source if some hay you can't soak out enough of the sugar if it's really high. So that's something where, these horses actually do need nutrients. They actually do need certain minerals and certain amino acids and certain amount of, calories per day. And if you're lowering all that and then feeding them basically just fiber, they're not going to meet that nutrition need.
How long would that soaking the hay stopgap be safe to do before you need to make sure that you are covering all the gaps in everyone's experience?
The ECIR emergency diet basically says to remove from grass, remove grain, remove alfalfa, soak hay, and then add in flax, salt, magnesium.
Yep.
I think they might even have copper and zinc in there.
Yep.
And then once you do blood work, figure out, is it high insulin? Is it a diet issue? And then ideally you're testing hay like as soon as you can.
Yeah. So we're talking weeks.
Yeah. It's like in the acute phase when you're just trying to get a horse comfortable. So you're trying to do an elimination style diet. You're trying to eliminate as many causes of inflammation as possible to get to a baseline before you start, adding
Slowly
things back in and getting them comfortable. I don't know if Becky wanted to add in about what you do, because obviously there are some owners who can't test hay, and there's ways to feed in a way that you can make sure you're meeting those nutrients in a kind of baseline sort of way. But what do you do for owners, Becky, that can't test hay, but you're worried about if that hay is going to be high in sugar? Do you have them soak long term?
So this is a tough question for me because the ideal answer that I want to give to people is if you are going to commit to taking care of a metabolic horse, you need to commit to testing your hay.
Mm.
Hay is the largest proportion of your horse's diet. That's where most of their nutrients come from. And so it's beneficial to test your hay whether they have metabolic disease or not, but it is especially important when you're trying to control the sugars and starches in the diet. I think you're gambling when you choose to just soak your hay. Now, that said, depending on the hay species, there are hay species, and it's going to be different wherever you live. There are going to be hay species that are more prone to having a higher sugar and starch profile and ones that are going to be lower. It's why some veterinarians will recommend alfalfa, because alfalfa is inherently lower in sugars and starches usually, but it can be a problem for some metabolic horses because some of them don't do well with high protein. Yep. So it's individual to the horse, but hay testing really is so important. It's a worthwhile investment. It's worthwhile. The other thing that I run into with owners is they'll say, well, there's no way that my horse is getting too much sugar and starch from the hay because I feed a very coarse first cut. And they assume because it appears coarse that it's high in fiber. And that can be the case. But there's more than just maturity that impacts sugar and starch in hay, like the time of day. If it's cut late in the day,
the time of day that it's cut has a massive impact. There's so many things.
Yep.
There are so many factors. In fact, I had a client a couple years ago who came to me with 2 horses that foundered, and she was wondering why all of a sudden. And she mentioned getting some very early cut first cut. I think it was cut in May, and it was very green. And when it came back, the NSC content, which does not necessarily reflect the insulin responsive sugars and starches, it also represents the fructans, which whole nother conversation, but it was at 23%. So it was very clear why those horses had foundered on that hay. And she thought she was safe because it was first cut, because everyone seems to think that first cut is a safe hay for metabolic horses. It may not be. I've seen second cut hays that test way better. It just depends on how mature it was when it was cut, what time of day it was cut, the species of grasses that are in the hay. So yeah, I guess the short story of my long opinion is you need to test your hay. Soaking is not a long-term solution. If you have to soak, you absolutely have to work with a nutritionist to make sure you're meeting all the other needs, especially if you're dealing with a PPID horse, because they already have issues with their immune system and their ability to keep muscle. So if you're getting rid of things like zinc and copper, which are very important for the immune system, and you're washing out important amino acids and protein, they're not going to thrive. And their feet will be worse, in terms of quality. So that's my opinion.
Yep. I kind of agree with you, Becky, even though in my area it's very difficult to get hay from one single source. It's often from all over. So just because you're getting hay now, in 3 weeks' time, it's not going to be the same source of hay. But you can build a shed and buy big loads in and have it tested, and then have it tested regularly when you get a new load in.
I was really lucky where I was in Canberra that there was a lot of tested hay. Like when you bought your hay, you get a copy of the hay test.
And asking for tested hay, the more people that ask for it, the more and will pay extra for tested hay, the more motivation there is for haymakers and feed stores to provide that test. Also wanted to add, before I forget, alfalfa is lucerne hay. Alfalfa is lucerne for anyone in Australia, if you didn't know that. And how often do you hear vets say, just soak lucerne hay, just feed them soaked lucerne hay, that's all they need? I hear that all the time with laminitic horses, and that is the nutrition plan from vets, and that's fine short term, but it maybe if they're not sensitive for protein. Because does soaking reduce protein in lucerne? I don't think it does.
Yeah, I think there are some amino acids that do wash out with the hay, with the water. So again, soaking is so imperfect. Like you don't know how much, it depends on the temperature of the water and how long you soak it and how good you rinsed it after you, or if you didn't rinse it at all. It's an imperfect science. It's like an immediate something you can do in the moment when your horse is having an acute attack to try to improve the situation, but it's not a long-term solution.
It's a Band-Aid.
And actually, Lucy, you made a great point. You can't test hay from a supplier and assume the next load is going to be the same, because it could be coming from a different field. It could be coming from a different region. You don't know. So you
could be coming from a different time of day.
But you can also ask, just ask more questions.
Yes.
Yeah. In the United States, we have a lot of feed companies that will actually do a free analysis. Now, it doesn't include enough for you to build your whole nutrition plan off of, but if you're looking for hay that you just want to know the protein, sugar, and starch, a lot of times, like if we can get feed stores or hay farmers on board with sending out samples to a free analysis that just provides protein, calories, sugar, and starch, that's enough for people to know, is this safe for me to even feed it? And then from there, they can then test the hay themselves once they've bought it to figure out the actual major and minor mineral balancing and what they need to do to feed their horse. But for the safety requirement, I think that we should push to get more feed stores and hay farmers to just get that free analysis done in the States. I don't know if you guys have that in
We do
Australia.
not.
No, that would be great.
Yeah.
Would be great.
All right. Last one, Lisa. In your opinion, once a horse has recovered from laminitis, they're sound, they're happy, the hoof capsule maybe has grown out and is looking good, are they safe? Or is this more of a long-term management situation?
All right, so this leads perfectly on from the discussion we were just having about soaking hay and whatnot. So there is a lot of opinion that once a horse is founded, it's always founded, right? And that it will never return to previous levels of soundness, and that's just it. That horse is just forevermore. And then there's the opposite end of the spectrum where that horse is recovered, they can go back to whatever their management was pre-laminitis or foundering. As we've discussed extensively, laminitis is not a primary disease. It is a result. It is a symptom. And the situation that the horse was in when it founded is going to lead to being founded again. Okay? So you can't just say, my horse is recovered, I'm going to toss them back out in the pasture. You know, my horse is recovered, so I'm going to put them back on that bagged feed that I was feeding them when they founded because I like it. Like it from now on, there is there scar tissue? Is there the lamina, does it remember? Irrespective of all that, it happened in the first place. It can and probably will happen again, right? And it will happen easier again. Just like every time a woman has a baby, it's harder to lose weight after that baby. and it's forevermore, you need to be managing this horse. Okay. So, and the biggest thing is, yes, diet, but also stress levels and, making sure that horse is getting appropriate movement. It becomes a whole management plan. And sometimes we need to let go of the traditional thoughts on how to manage horses that we've always done, and make changes so that the horse that we love, that we have spent so much money and time and emotional energy on rehabbing, stays sound and doesn't founder or have laminitis again every single year repeatedly. So that means going back to species appropriate, like horses in the wild, in ideal conditions for horses, don't get laminitis. Some wild horses do, but that's because of excess, same reason, they're not in their ideal environment. They're moving too much. They're in an area with way too much grass, way too much sugar, etc., etc. So you need to keep the sugars low forevermore. And like we were talking earlier, every single horse that I manage is managed on a low sugar diet. You can think I ride my horse 5 days a week, walk, trot, canter in a dressage arena. That's not hard work. That's light work. Maybe medium work, maybe. You do not need to feed your horse grain unless they're in heavy to very heavy work. Think race horses. Think endurance horses. Right?
Eventers.
You're not doing that. You're not doing, I can almost guarantee you're not riding your horse enough, or that horse is not moving enough to be fed any sort of grain. Full stop, the end. In my very strong opinion, right? Go back to being simple, right? Feed them lots of forage. Make sure that if they do have access to any grass, it should be a low sugar grass. There's a lot of really good native Australian grasses that are fairly safe for horses to graze on. However, they're very sensitive to livestock destroying it, right? So it becomes a whole pasture management thing. But if you want your horse out on grass, that's what you have to do. Build track systems, make sure your horse is being worked enough to keep their insulin level, blood sugar levels low, etc., etc. It's a long-term management plan. The rest of the horse's life.
Yeah.
All horses should be doing that anyway.
All horses should be doing that. Some horses are blessed and they're God's favorite, and they can live their entire lives being extremely overweight and they never get laminitis. Some horses can do that. But what other problems are happening throughout the body? Just because they're not getting laminitis doesn't mean that they're not having other issues, right? That is very rare, and even those horses need to be managed in a better way. Laminitis is not the worst thing that can happen to a horse. It's one of the worst things, but it's not the worst thing. And yeah, all horses should be kept in a species appropriate way. The end.
And I think it's really what Kat said drives home the point that prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? So we would like horses to not get laminitis in the first place.
Yes.
And the way to do that is to manage them in a species appropriate way on a low starch diet that's heavy in forage with plenty of movement with friends in a herd. That's prevention. If you prevent it, then you don't have to, you're already managing for it essentially. I also think part of the management plan that I didn't hear you mention, Lisa, was for some of these horses that we know have metabolic dysfunction, whether that's EMS or IR or PPID, we should be taking repeat blood values.
Yes.
Frequently to know what their status is, especially the PPID horses. I know at least here in the States, some horses with PPID might actually need to have their medications altered depending on the time of year. So when the seasonal rise happens in the fall, we'll sometimes have to test and see if we need to increase their medication. And then in the spring, it can come back down or, after the seasonal rise is over. So there are a lot of different moving components. That's where having a really good hoof care provider who you trust and can talk to is helpful, and a really great vet. You need both. It can't happen in ice. You can't do it alone. You shouldn't do it alone. You shouldn't have to, because you're going to need support. And you really need educated professionals who are experienced at managing and rehabbing cases like this, because it's a team approach. I don't think that any of us want to be rehabbing a case in isolation. We want to have a vet on our team and an owner on our team who's on board.
You can't be successful. You can't be successful otherwise.
Yeah. And Lisa, I liked what you said at the beginning about how, or when you were starting, you said that there's these two extremes sort of where people say once foundered, always foundered. And then people who say they're cured, they're totally fine now. And I actually had a conversation with somebody recently about how they're once they're foundered, they're always foundered. You can't rehab foundered horses. They're always going to have rotation. And I feel so strongly that that's not the case, that we can rehab these horses. We can, depending on how long they've been foundered, we can grow out this healthier lamina connection and we can even grow out rotation to where they have no rotation anymore in some cases. But how you do that is how you need to manage them for the rest of their lives. So whatever you did to rehab that laminitis and get them to have a healthy hoof again is what they need forever. It's not just, we did it and now it's better and now we can treat them however we want now. You have to treat them as if, they're on this, I don't want to say thin ice, but they need to be held with kid gloves for the rest of their lives. And if you do, you might never have another setback ever again. You might have a horse that is sound and comfortable and does great for the rest of their lives if you are on top of it. But, you have to do that. And I think that this kind of goes back to the conversation that we had even 20 minutes ago about how you do need to consider when you have a horse that's diagnosed with these metabolic issues or with laminitis or founder, are you able to care for this horse in the way that it needs for the rest of its life, financially, physically, emotionally? Are you going to be able to do what that horse needs for the rest of its life?
And there's no shame in saying, well, that's not something I'm able to commit to, and either finding a sure thing new home that can, but once that horse is out of your control, it's out of your control. You don't have any say over it. So my preference is, if you can't commit to that, you can humanely euthanize, and that's okay. I support that. That is okay, in my opinion. Would you guys disagree?
I agree. 100%.
I agree. I had that conversation today again with an owner of a foundered horse. And I said it 4 weeks ago. I said, you know, it would not be wrong to let this horse go because this person just doesn't have the ability to manage the horse in a way that it needs.
Yeah.
And I came back today and she said, I've been thinking about what you said every single day. And I'm like, well, she's still in the same amount of pain because we're not able to provide for her what she needs. And ethically, I don't think that's okay to have her living in this much pain. It's hard, but
it's not a failure.
It's
not a failure on your part if you cannot provide that for whatever reason. Financial reasons, emotional labor reasons. Maybe you have 6 kids, all with, all neurodivergent with special needs. It's okay. You don't even need to have that amount of excess stress. If it's not something that you are able to do, that's okay. And euthanasia is, horses do not care how long their life is.
There are worse things than death.
Way worse things than death. And
especially for a prey animal.
Exactly. Because
and
they
especially when they're in pain. Like, I would so much rather humanely euthanize a horse than leave them in pain.
Yep.
Yeah. It was really nice to hear your perspectives, and I think it will help a lot of people.
Thank you. I really enjoyed this chat. This was awesome. And some really great aha moments even for me.
Yeah, me too. When we have conversations and I'm still learning. So thank you guys.
Thank you.
Always learning.
Yay. Good job, guys. You're all so smart.
Snaps.
We are all so smart.
This is so cool. I mean, gosh, we could talk about laminitis forever.
I know.
Thanks for listening to today's Hoof to Horse podcast. If you enjoyed our discussion, be sure to check out the Hoof to Horse Academy, an online learning platform for horse enthusiasts and professionals. You can find us on all your favorite social media platforms. We look forward to you joining us for our next episode.